So first, a little bit about myself. I, as was mentioned, am the co-founder of Chai Hack Night and also of a civic technology company called DataMade. So I'll be talking about the work that I've worked on in this talk and using a sort of set of examples from those organizations to sort of tell you some of the things that I've learned along the way. I will have a caveat that everything that I'm going to show you is something, again, I worked on, and also something that I did kind of in a pro bono way. So none of this work has been paid for, although there's plenty of that kind of work to show off too. OK, so if you would like, you can follow along. I like transparency and openness, so these slides are open for anybody to follow along with. There's links in them if you'd like to click along too. OK, and it's just a bit.ly/CHN opportunity with a dash. OK, so what has changed in the last 5 to 10 years? Well, there has been a real proliferation of free and powerful technology tools. There's all of a sudden, open source has sort of taken over the world as far as software goes. Python, JavaScript, HTML, Ruby, those are all open source languages and have supplanted the sort of closed source ones that came before them. There's tools like QGIS. Has anybody here ever used that tool before? It's an awesome geospatial platform, and it's free. And you can do amazing stuff with geometries on it. Things like Google Docs exist now, right? And I think that that's probably something that a lot of folks in this room use, but maybe take for granted just how amazing it is to be able to go in and see everybody's little cursor in there and type along collaboratively. Because before that, you were sending 40 different versions of the same document, final, version 2, final, whatever, to everybody. And it's really changed the game. It's made things a lot easier. So technology is more accessible now than it ever was before. There's projects that we can do now, folks in this room can do now, that even 5 or 10 years ago would have taken tens of thousands of dollars and a huge team to put together. And now you can do some of this stuff with pretty much only volunteer effort. It makes events like this even possible. So the next thing that's really changed in the last 5 to 10 years is there's been this explosion of open government data. And if anybody's ever heard of the term open data before, it almost always goes without saying, even though it's not never said, that means government data. So just whenever you hear that phrase, it means the word government is just the silent part of that phrase. But there's so much open data that exists now at both the city level. The city of Chicago has really led the way among other cities as far as releasing open data sets. They have something over 600 unique data sets for free that you can download off the data portal, data.cityofchicago.org. Cook County has an awesome data portal, and the state of Illinois has a data portal. And at the federal level, there is also data.gov, and then even before that, even before open data was a thing, there was the census, right? And that's open data. And there's weather data. That is all those weather apps that you see that you have. That's been open data for decades now, right? So it's not a new concept, but there's just been this wave of new data. And it's become a very, not just acceptable, but something that governments really strive to do, right? They see the value in doing it. So this is something that is new, right, in the last 5 to 10 years. The third thing that's really changed, I think, is there's been an urge to step up what I see as civic participation. Maybe you felt a little bit weird and bad after the November 2016 election. And if you read the news, everything seems to be on fire. And it's paralyzing to sometimes read that stuff and not know what to do, right? It's very difficult to think that you could have any influence whatsoever on Washington, right? You may also be feeling that locally political power is being held from you, that other people always seem to be making decisions and you're not. And why is that, right? And there's voting. Voting is very awesome and important. There's an election coming up in November. You should vote. And also a municipal election in February. You should also vote. But that sometimes doesn't feel like enough, right? And not everybody can run for office or join a campaign. Sometimes that's very grueling work. I've volunteered for campaigns before. It's a lot of work. You have to really be into it. So there's this urge, right? And people want to engage in some sort of civic way. And that's a sort of a pent-up urge that I think a lot of people are feeling, right? So enter civic tech, right? And because of the history of this space, and I think this slide is less important now, but at a time there was this debate about what is civic tech. And maybe you could talk to some different folks and they could give you different answers. The definition that I subscribe to is a very simple one, and it's the one that Chai Hacknight also espouses, which is it's just tools to create, support, and serve the public good. That could be government technology, that could be journalists using data and publishing stories with it, that could be nonprofits, it could be academics, and it could even be for-profit businesses doing that kind of thing. So this is what I see as something that's new, and that all these different kinds of things that have changed has really, it's really made civic tech something that people are looking to, right? So to go to the title of my talk, what are the opportunities that are enabled by civic tech? And I'm going to show you some projects in some somewhat chronological order that I've worked on, and you can kind of see a couple of different things that I've discovered, and sort of how my thinking on this has evolved over the last 6+ years. So the first thing, and this is where we started, was you can make government information more accessible. So this is ChicagoLobbyists.org. If anybody's ever heard of this site. It's still up. It's a little bit outdated. But this is the very first project that I ever worked on that was, it was before we even called it civic tech. It was an open government app, is what we would call it. And I did this with a group of folks known as Open City. And this group really, we wanted to take data that the city had just released. So we got a new mayor. The manual administration was new in 2011. They started releasing open data for the first time. And we're like, OK, let's make something useful with that data. Browsing the portal. Oh, lobbyist data. That seems interesting. We don't really know anything about lobbyists, but we know how to make websites. So we'll take that data and try to make sense of it as sort of just regular citizens, right? And so this is the result of that, taking lobbyist data and making what we would like to describe as a social network for lobbyists in the city of Chicago. You can see how much they were being paid. You can see who the top paid lobbyists were. You could see who was paying for those lobbyists and how much and what kinds of activities they were being paid for. And this is just sort of our idea behind it was take information that was first of all, like locked away in some government database, and then put on a data portal and made available as spreadsheets, and then actually make it something that you could actually get some sort of use out of, right? So you can browse around and use and interact with this data in a way that wasn't possible before. So you lower the barrier. You make access to data easier. This website, we were very fortunate, I think, because it was very successful. The city of Chicago thought it was awesome because we did this again with volunteer labor, and the city got a free lobbyist transparency website out of it. So the CTO at the time, John Tolva, threw it into his PowerPoint presentation and was like, hey, and this is him at the City Club. Does anybody know what that is? It's it's an event where a lot of powerful people get together and talk about the goings on of Chicago. John Tolva was talking about, here's what I do. I'm the chief technology officer. We care about efficient government services and open data, and we have this plan, government as a platform, and look what happens. If we do this, then Chicago Lobbyists gets built, right? So the city really thought it was awesome, and it was a very encouraging kind of interaction. So we just kind of continued to ride that wave and continue to make projects. It was a very encouraging first foray into doing this kind of work. And that's really what got me started doing this kind of work, and it's what's brought me here today. So after we built Chicago Lobbyists, we're like, OK, let's look at some of the other data that's available. Oh, zoning. Zoning is interesting. Man, it's a 350-page PDF document that no one will ever read. But it's really important because it tells you what's going on when you walk down the street. Why is that building that height? Why are the skyscrapers downtown? Why is that park there? It's because it's all been designated by the city and zoned. And it's actually really important. This is information that that if you are a developer, if you're an architect, if you're a landowner or a homeowner, this is really important information to know. And it's locked away in a PDF. And so we decided, OK, let's try to make this fun and exciting. I know. I liked this game when I was growing up. It was called SimCity. And I, by the way, played SimCity 2000, if anybody remembers that one. And so we got a little carried away and decided to start. First, we took the color palette, and we're like, OK, blue's commercial, yellow's industrial, green's residential. Then we realized really quickly that life's more complicated than a computer game. And so there's these plan developments. Well, those are red. Oh, wait, each of the different types of zones have different kinds of density. So there's shades of color. But like overall, we kind of pulled it off. And then we decided to throw in some of the graphics from it, and then the sound, so you can actually play the SimCity 2000 music while you're browsing City of Chicago, and this is it. So this is secondcityzoning.org. You can go to it now. It continues to be the most popular website ongoing that we have ever built because it's a utility. The City of Chicago uses this website. In fact, I know folks at the Department of Planning and Development, they probably were like Googling around, and we got like listed pretty high up on Google. And so all of a sudden, they're using this website to answer calls that they get about, oh, well, what's my building zone? Because the city gets those calls. They use our website to do that. So it's become a utility. It's also kind of fun to use. The one thing that we were a little worried about when we built this website is that we kind of blatantly ripped off the graphics and music for this video game, and we were worried about getting sued. And we had a little disclaimer in our About page saying, like, Dear Maxis, please don't sue us. We think you're great. And then I tried to like scrounge up a link to go buy the game, even though it was like 25 years old, and did that. Well, I was surprised that I got this email shortly after we launched. This is the lead gameplay scripter for the SimCity team, because this is a game that's like on, I don't even know how many iterations it is on now. And they're like, we just heard about it. We think this is great. And I'm like, yes, not only did you not sue us, you think it's cool. So that was very validating when that happened. So I took a screenshot of that email. OK, so far we've talked about these different websites that can make information that was already there, right? This is not like we're not making any new data. We're just saying, hey, here it is. It's easier to find, right? This is when we start sort of taking things into a little bit of a different turn. This is Clear Streets, clearstreets.org. The city of Chicago has about 300 snowplows that whenever it snows, they send them out and they plow the streets. And the city had released this website that lets you see where the snowplows are. You can see a little map. It's called the Plow Tracker. And it shows you here is like all 300 plows, and they're just like little graphics on a map. And if you sat there and watched the map and like 20 seconds would pass, it just like everything like move a little bit. And you're like, OK, I guess they're plowing the streets. That's cool. It was a neat thing, but we kind of thought there was maybe some more we could do with that. Knowing where the plows are is cool, but what's maybe more useful is where have the plows been? Has my street been plowed? And so we scraped that data. Again, this is data that I don't think even today is on the data portal. We scrape that website, and we map it to the street grid of Chicago, and then we draw the lines. And so as the city is plowing, then you see these lines start to fill in. And you can see whether or not your street was plowed. You can type in your address, and you can see here's, at this date, plow S12345 came by, right? And this is a website that we're like, OK, this is information that people want to know. Certain mayoral elections have been decided by the removal or not removal of snow. Does anybody remember Mayor Blandick? He lost because his administration failed to plow the streets, and that's how Jane Byrne won the election and became the mayor after him. So people in Chicago care very much about this. And you hear, at least I hear a lot, like people complaining, oh, I saw a plow driver driving down the street or just parked, they're at McDonald's or something, they're not doing their job. And there's a lot of people who think that they're just not doing their jobs. That's like a common thing, unfortunately. And we just wanted to go out and sort of see if that was true or not. We kind of knew it wasn't, but we wanted to see the data. And so after we did this, we really wanted to answer that question. And the other question, which is it fair? Are they actually plowing all the streets? equally, right? Is the north side getting preferential treatment over the south side? And we found that actually they were. They actually did a pretty good job of covering all the streets. And so we're like, OK, great. We answered that question. This site's fun and exciting. We'll just keep it going. Every time it snows, I get a text message, because I have a series of elaborate scripts that tell me when they turn their plow tracker on, and then I have to go kick off a bunch of scripts. I've tried to automate it, but it's not as easy as you might think. And so we turn this thing on every time it snows. And a couple of winters go by, and we get a call from someone who lives on the north side of Chicago, on the block of, I think, 4600 North Kelso in the 37th Ward. And they said, we haven't had our street plowed at all winter. Can you do something? And I was like, well, no, we can just show you where the plows are. I have no power to tell the plows where to go. But they were so desperate because they tried calling the city, they tried calling their alderman, and eventually, after they emailed us, they emailed NBC5. And they sent a team out to go investigate what was going on in the street. And those producers for that show reached out to us and said, hey, we think something's going on. We're going to do a segment. Can you check the data? Can you just look and see if this data is actually corroborating the story? And so we did that work. We looked at and this is the map of it right here. We saw the plow would go straight, and then it would just turn left. And this is the street that never got plowed all winter. And so we backed it up with data. The story hit the news, and it was a hugely successful story. And would you know what happened the next day? Their street got plowed. And we were able to, in a very local way, in a local case, actually use data to help make city services more equitable. The next winter, the opposite thing happened. Does anybody know who Alderman Ed Burke is? He is the 14th Ward Alderman. I think he's celebrating his 50th year in City Council this year. Or was it last year? Anyways, he's been in power for a very long time. And this building here is where he lives. And it's a dead-end one-way street. And there was reports from the neighbors that his street was, that street was getting plowed way before anybody else's. And so Dan Milopoulos, who was working for the Sun-Times at the time, I think now he's at WBZ, he went out there and he went to go check it out, and then he emailed us. He's like, hey, can you confirm that the plows went down this street? And so we did, and found that his street was plowed 5 times before anybody else's street in the neighborhood got plowed. And so Dan, being a good reporter, started asking questions and figured out that somehow that street had gotten added to the list of main arterial streets for the city of Chicago. So it was on the official books, and then the plow drivers were required to go do that. And so after this report came out, this is the cover of the Sun-Times, and this is actually after the first report. It snowed again, after the first newspaper article came out. It snowed again a couple days later, and he did it again, and we checked again. And so this is the second cover page of the Sun-Times that says he has snow shame. And so eventually, the Inspector General got involved, and there was a report issued, and the plow book was changed, so the route was removed. So we found that while the city does a pretty good job of, on the whole, being equitable, in these local cases, you can find places where it doesn't quite happen right the way it should. And that's the kind of thing that we saw that was really exciting about open data, that we were able to sort of see this meta picture about what's going on, but then you can also zoom in super close and see what's going on in this particular block. So this is starting to get into all right, we're not just talking about making data open and making it accessible and easier to understand. We're actually applying that data to help reporters and to actually have some sort of impact or outcome. So this kind of gets us into going down a little bit of a route about well, okay, if that's something that you can do with this plowing website, what are some other things you can do with technology and open data? And so we started thinking about ways we can raise awareness about issues that we care about. This one, if anybody's ever heard of it, is called is there sewage in the Chicago River.com. The original title had a swear word in it, and it was cute and everything, but we decided to go with the more like PG-rated version of the site. And what it does is whenever the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District announces that they have to perform what they call a combined sewer overflow, or when a combined sewer overflow happens, they have to alert the public about it. And so they have this website that you've probably never been to before, and a page on that website you've probably never been to or couldn't find, and it told you that this was happening. The backstory behind why this happens is the city of Chicago used to not be here, and there was like a swamp. And when it rained, the water would just kind of go and hang out in the swamp. Now there's pavement, and that water just hits the pavement and goes straight into the sewer. And the planners of the day decided early in Chicago's history to have a combined sewer and storm sewer system so that all the sewage goes into the same place all the rainwater goes into. And that system has a capacity, and when that capacity overflows, they have a choice. They can either let people's basements flood, or they can let that water flow into the Chicago River, which is what they do. So that is what a combined sewer overflow is, and it happens way more often than you may think. In fact, it happened last night because it rained a little bit, and it's happening more and more, even though they keep expanding. This is actually a picture. It's kind of the footprint of it. This is Cook County. You can see kind of here's a lot of the pipes, and they have some big reservoirs that they've created. This is like what one of them look like. This is like underground. These are like huge mega tunnels, right? And so we wanted people to be aware that this is something that is happening, and that did you know that you actually vote for the commissioners of the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, and that you could have some kind of influence on this? And if you think it's gross, which it is, then maybe you could do something about it, right? Because everybody, by the way, hates us for this downstream of us. Like, the water used to go, like Chicago history, 1900, we reversed the flow of the Chicago River because it used to flow into Lake Michigan, but that's our drinking supply. And so now we reversed it, which is like an amazing feat, but it goes down the Sewer and Sanitary Ship Canal, which is literally the name of the riverway that like connects to the Mississippi River, and then it all deposits into the Gulf of Mexico. And there's a giant like kill zone of like bad chemicals and stuff that like kills fish. It's like really big. So like everybody downstream of us hates us for this, and people in the Gulf of Mexico also hate us for this. And we're like a major contributor to this as residents of this metropolitan area. So we just wanted you to know about this and maybe feel a little bad about it, and then maybe do something about it, right? And so that was the idea behind this one. But we thought about it a little bit more after we built that one. And that website's live, by the way. It continues every time it rains and a CSO, combined sewer overflow, happens. It sends out a tweet, and people go and visit the site, and it's like continues to get a lot of traffic because it continues to happen. So we decided, okay, well maybe we can start thinking about how we can actually take that a step further and actually push for some policy changes. And so this is a website that's actually been presented here before a couple of years ago called Chicago's $1 Million Blocks. This is a website that we saw what was going on in not just Chicago, but in the entire United States about incarceration. And there's a really awesome project in New York called the $1 Million Blocks Project that was built in about 2006. And we saw what they had done is they took sentencing data. So people that were sentenced in a 5-year period and how long their sentence was for, and they had their home address, and so we were able to calculate here's where their city block is, and added up all the people that lived on that city block that had a sentence and how many sentence years that was. Then we multiplied that by how much it costs to incarcerate someone in the state of Illinois for 1 year, which is about $22,000, rough calculation, and add that all up. And so New York had done that for New York, and we decided, let's do that for Chicago and take that data. And actually, Tracy's not in this room. Tracy's around the corner over here. Tracy was the one who actually got this data. He was able to get this data, which is very difficult to get, to build this website. Because we wanted to build this website for about 4 years and couldn't until we got the data. And we built this website showing block by block how much money was being spent to incarcerate people that used to live there. And the idea behind it is to not, like you always hear this line in government, we don't have the money, we can't do it. We can't make any new changes, we don't have any money. Well, if you look at this, this is where the money is being spent, right? You're spending billions of dollars, but instead of spending it on things like schools or other restorative justice projects, you're putting people in cells, right? That's like how you're spending money, and this is what it costs. And this is where it's happening, and these are the areas of the city of Chicago that are affecting that. So this is a website that we really, like, it's quite a far ways from the Chicago Lobbyists website, which was just sort of showing you the data. We're like, here's the data, and it's bad, and you should do something about it. And this website has a bunch of information about restorative justice things that you can look into and groups you can support. And this website was hugely popular. This is actually, Second City Zoning is a popular sort of continuing use website. This website was our biggest like splash we've ever gotten, like 30,000 views in a month. And it was all over Facebook, and the guy who made The Wire tweeted about it, and so did like Mindy Kaling, and it got to the Obama White House, and people, I know people have like told me, like there's printouts of this website like at the White House, and they're using that as they're thinking about their policies. It got to the governor's mansion. So this is a website that like was immensely popular. But I think we really like tried to make it popular, and we learned all along the way all the different sort of tricks you can do to get some popularity. It's got a hook, and then we made sure it was easy to share. And these are the, like I said, some of the folks who've tweeted about it. This is David Spielvogel, who is the former policy director for Mayor Emanuel. We got on the news. This is Mike Flannery, Fox 32. And he's talking about it, and they actually went to one of the blocks and interviewed some folks there about like, is this like ring true? And the folks who live there said yes. And so this is a website that really like carried far, right? So those are my examples, and I have more, but I'm going to stop there because there's a lot. And I wanted to kind of think about, when I was preparing this talk, some of the lessons that I've learned over the last 6 years about not just sort of the evolution of how these different projects have gone and how we think about them and how we've applied that to the new work we do now, but thinking about like lessons I can share with everybody that are like simple but like generally true, and I think hopefully useful to you as you are making your own civic projects. So this is, has anyone ever seen Burn After a Reading? This is like a great scene at the end of the movie. So what do we learn? That technology is really an amplifier. Whatever is there, it's going to amplify. If that thing is a bad idea and a harmful idea, it will get amplified. If it's a good idea and a constructive idea, it will get amplified. But like technology can really have, what the Spider-Man quote says, with great power comes great responsibility. That's what I've seen, right? Like we were just a bunch of like technologists, and we're like, let's make a website about lobbyists, and then all of a sudden we're having like meetings at the 5th floor of City Hall because they want to like learn about like the data we've created, right? I know Claire is here, and like you built My Building Doesn't Recycle, right? And got like a law passed, right? So like you can actually like be a nobody, but then just build a website, and all of a sudden you can, like, people will listen to you, right? Which is kind of like an insane thing if you think about it, right? I got no business, it seemed, like looking back on it, like being in some of those meetings, but there it was, right? And so technology is a real way to get to boost and to amplify something, but it is something that you can actually cause like a lot of harm with if you're not careful about it. The other thing, second little lesson I've learned is that if you want to have impact, you have to be doing it for a while. That's very much in the spirit of this event, why we meet every week. If this was a monthly event, like we would not be able to sort of have the staying power. If I did not start a company, DataMade, and do this as my day job, I wouldn't be able to continue doing this work as intensely as I have in the last 6 years. And in order, and I've seen it time and time again, in order to actually have impact, you have to be doing it for a long time. Technology is a great way to get a big boost, but technology alone is really not enough. You need to be doing it for a while, you need to be learning, you need to be building relationships, And this is like how change is made. It's not like, and I know as technologists we love to think about, oh, I'm going to make an app and then the problem will be solved. That's never happened, like ever, right? Like maybe you like optimized your spreadsheet successfully, or like you made a little like task that you made easier. You can do little victories like that, but as far as like actual change, that doesn't just happen, right? It takes a long time, and that's just something you have to recognize. The other one, which is something that I've definitely been thinking a lot about, and actually my partner Forrest Gregg at DataMade, we've talked about this a lot over the last few years, especially. There's this theory, and we didn't really realize it at the time when we were building sites like Chicago Lobbyists. But there is this theory that we were kind of subscribing to, that if you just give the information to people, they'll make better decisions. I think that that's a general theory that I saw become very pervasive in the sort of civic tech national landscape, is just let's just give people the information and they will intelligently digest it, and then they will then be better informed citizens and they will make better decisions. And if anything over the last 2 years has become like absolutely clear, it's that is absolutely not true. Right? More information is not good, right? More information can actually be bad. It can like completely paralyze you. You can be like, well, but it's complicated, so maybe I won't do anything, right? That's like a very common, and it's a strategy, right? Disinformation campaigns are totally in right now, right? And it's because they work. So the theory that we sort of set out in the early days, that you could just put the information out there and then like ... like progress or like better democracy, is just not true. It's still good. Like, it's good to do. You can have information that is out there and help people, but it alone is not good enough. And then the very last one is, I looked this up. This is apparently attributed to as an African proverb, but then there's like suspicion around that, so like maybe / not an African proverb. But the idea is, if you want to go quickly, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. We've learned that from the very beginning of building Chicago Lobbyists sort of as an insular team, there's a lot of limits to what we could do and what we knew. And as we kind of continue to do work in this space, and as DataMade has become a consultancy, right? We like work with clients who know way more than us about what they do. That's actually the best way to get anything done. And it's actually, again, in the spirit of this event, right? That this is a whole group of people. If you saw during introductions, right? There's a whole group of people. There's a lot of technologists, there's a lot of people in government, people in academia. There's people with all sorts of different skills and backgrounds and ideas, and that is really powerful. I can't really stress enough how amazing it is to have a space that is this. It's not common in cities to have a place that can bring in so many people from so many different backgrounds and perspectives. And that's powerful, right? And I think that that's the future. That's what we have to do, right? We have to work together. We have to find groups that maybe we aren't going to be comfortable talking to. Maybe you have to go out of your way. Maybe you have to go to the far south side or the far west side, or go to a neighborhood that you've never been to before and talk to people there and work with them. And I really, truly believe that after doing all this work, that as technologists, we have a very valuable skill, right? That skill is to wield the web and data and to do amazing things with it. But it's not going to be nearly as potent, and it's not going to achieve the results that we want unless we actually work with people who know way better about the things that we care about than we do, right? I'm not an expert on the education system. I'm not an expert on all the different things that are going on in the city of Chicago, on criminal justice. But there are a bunch of people in the city who are. And I think that it's our mission, it's my mission, and I hope it's something that you guys take on as well, to really strive to find those people and to make those connections and to make it your mission. So that's my talk. Hands are shooting up. Thank you. And I guess, yeah, we'll pause. And we can take some questions. Do we want to swap mics?
I'm a data scientist looking to develop my web development skills, so I was just wondering if you could talk about, like, you find this great data set and you have a great idea for a website. What are the tools that you're bringing out right away, especially open source stuff?
Oh, sure. Excel's awesome. Google Sheets is awesome. tools like QGIS I mentioned. I'll also use fusion tables a lot if it's geospatial data. It's really easy to take like a set of tabular or spreadsheet data and like make a really quick and dirty map out of that, and sometimes that's really valuable. Folks on the team at DataMade, they do a lot of data science work with Python and scripting, and our Jupyter notebooks are really helpful for like creating, not just exploring, but sort of keeping track of every step as you're exploring and having a repeatable process. That's actually become a really valuable thing to do, just because you can like start playing around with data and like get down to some direction, and you're like, what did I do? And then you can really kind of question whether or not what you found is legitimate. So being able to reproduce your steps is really important.
What do you believe is the biggest internal challenge faced by the civic tech community?
I think getting out of our own like bubble. I think we tend to think that we know everything. I mean, it's like, have you ever heard of engineer's disease? It's basically like, I'm good at this, so therefore I'm good at everything. That is definitely something that you have to be like humbled a little bit and get out of your own sense of what's right and what's the best thing to do. I think that that's generally true for humans, but I think it's especially true for the civic tech community nationally. It's something that's hard work.
One of the things I hear you say is that there needs to be space for feedback, and that's imperative for informatics systems to work well, properly. Some form of accountability, right? So you make data available, somebody might glean from it and say, oh shit, something's here. I'm one of those people. So my organization, Sweetwater Foundation, actually is on one of your $1 million blocks. No one cares. So we presented the data. So $2.79 million of taxpayer data, dollars, keeping the people that listed, that was in Mosley School for Social Reform and Orphans and Encouragement, was incarcerated, it was a homeless shelter, and all this other kind of stuff, right? We turned it into a farm, we employ people, we do food, we do carpentry, we do education, and we expanded for 4 city blocks. We went to the city, we went to the Alderman, we went to the offices, mayor's offices, and nobody cares. Very few people care. We tried to apply for the neighborhood opportunity funds, we tried to do all this other stuff, and we have made over $1 million of impact in that area, and we reference that information. And there has been very little accountability, including the fact that we use...
When you say accountability, you mean from the government?
From anybody.
Okay.
People locally all care. Everybody understands the trajectory of where it has gone, where it's come from. We've gotten audio interviews, all that stuff. So to make it a little bit shorter, we presented it back to the various channels, and they said it's not economic impact in a quantifiable way. We have 4 contiguous city blocks. We have the first timber frame barn in the city of Chicago. We raise it at the block party. We employ all these people. We feed people regularly. And something has to shift for the logos, pathos, ethos. We have the ethos on the ground. You have the logos. We haven't figured out how to shift the trajectory of the pathos to structured human consciousness. We've got to figure that out. We also applied for the large lots, which you have a hand in, and we were denied. Despite the fact that we have done this impact for 4 straight years over 4 contiguous blocks. So we're trying to figure out how, anybody in the room, how to partner in this era where facts should matter, data should matter. Where do we work together in unison to figure out how to go back to the radical aspect, which is of overstone to the root? We love to welcome people to come and have a hackathon or something, but it hasn't, no one's dared to go into our neighborhood in Washington Park and Inglewood.
So do you have a specific question?
Yeah, so how do we bridge the gap between, where is the space for the feedback loop? If somebody says, hey, I mean, you create some great examples of like, I have an urgent matter that needs to be addressed, and I don't know who can do it. You can't do it, you pushed it in the news, and then all of a sudden the news said, oh yeah, we'll take on the challenge. But what happens when the news isn't, what's the space that needs to happen to emerge for the feedback loop, for people to come together to share more data?
Okay, so how do you get people to care?
Yeah.
Right?
Who's the translator?
Yeah. I mean, I think back on all the people that come and have spoken at Tri-Hack Night. I mean, we had Rachel Parada, who's a PR activist, and the work that they did around the trauma center on the south side, right? She's like she gave a talk here. She wasn't talking about like making code, but she's talking about like how she uses social media campaigns to draw attention, right? I mean, everything you just said sounds amazing, right? I think it sounds like you have had some success, right? The data, and I'm thinking back on another presentation that I was just actually talking about earlier. Adrienne Alexander, who's a lobbyist for AFSCME, she came and presented here a few years ago talking about what's the sort of like magic mix to get legislators to care. Data is one of those components, but it has to be data plus someone who's a constituent in that ward or whatever legislative district you're looking at. You have to have a compelling story, right, to go with it too. It sounds like you have both of those things, right? So I can't say like what is it going to take to get the ear of the mayor of the city of Chicago. I don't know. Like most people have no insight into what that office does as far as making decisions, right? And city council, like frankly, doesn't do a lot of legislating. So there's, some big challenges there. But I do think there are pathways, as I've shown a couple of examples. You can kind of, there's a news peg that we definitely like have taken advantage of in the past. There's an app for that, right? Like we've gotten in the news just because we made a thing about X, and X was the thing we cared about, and the reporter's like, oh, cool, I'm gonna write about that because there's an app for that, right? So there's ways you can leverage technology to amplify your voice, but it has to have all those components there. So, I mean, I'm happy to talk to you afterwards about some more things.
What is the limit for volunteerism in civic tech? How do you feel about providing free products and services for the city?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time not getting paid for making stuff. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think that's a personal decision that everybody makes. Everybody's here in this room. As far as I can tell, no one's being paid to be here in this room right now, except for Colette. Thank you. Scrappers Film Group's awesome. Thank you for recording us. But I would say that, it's a personal choice. I've seen burnout happen. That's real. There are groups, like counterparts to our group in different cities, and people get, like, it's very exciting in the beginning, and then it can get overwhelming, and they just have to, like, quit. And I saw that happening. I didn't want that to happen to me. And so, like, I was fortunate enough to be able to start a business to do that full time. But that's obviously not something everybody can do. But I would say that volunteer as much as you feel like you can and want to. People come and go, and they come back, right? And that's something that this space, we've built it to be flexible, to handle sort of the ebb and flow of people who come in and want to volunteer, right? It's a challenge on its own, right? It's not just like organizing a group. It's organizing a group of people that you don't know if they'll be there next week, right? And that's a real challenge. So I would say the limits are variable, and I would say that some projects have actually come out of ChiHackNet as volunteer projects and have become quite successful. Like, anybody ever heard of MRelief? They're like $1 million nonprofit now, and they started as a breakout group here. So there's avenues, and I think a bit of advice that I kind of learned early on, just when it comes to sort of being sustainable and getting paid for your work. There's this idea that we especially had with Chicago lobbyists. We're like, we built this thing, all right, we're gonna get paid. Nobody will pay you for something you've already built, unless it's a product and you think about doing all that stuff. But if you've done the work and you expect someone to be like, all right, here's a grant, that never happens, right? But we thought it would. What that stuff has done has been a portfolio of things that we can use to, again, sell work, right? Look what we can do. Look what we can do for you. That's how we've leveraged this kind of work. That's how I've leveraged this kind of work to get paid. But yeah, I mean, eventually you got to figure out if you are going to do a big, ambitious project. I mean, by the way, Chicago's $1 Million Blocks was a project that took us, DataMade built this project pro bono. We built it with our own staff time, and those staff were paid. But we decided to do it as a company pro bono. And so in order to be able to do the kind of heavy lifting that was required for this project, we had to have an institution that we built to support that. And that's real. You got to think about that. So for folks in the room who are building projects, start small. That's a universally useful piece of advice. Is don't try to make Facebook. Try to make something that's like a one-page website. Like that could be really cool and really powerful. And then you can make the next thing after that, right? And so think about taking the right size bites.
Thank you, Derek, for presenting tonight.
Thank you.